Okay, so in the last video, we studied how to measure expected return, right? And beginning we, go through the concept of the return risk, and we measure the holding period return, right? Using the cash flow you received and also price change, right? The total over the beginning price you purchased the investment, right? We solve the holding period return, also called total return. Now we solve the expected return. In this video, we will continue to measure risk. Right? We use variance and standard deviations, right? Standard deviations to measure risk. So variance and standard deviations are two measures of the volatility of return. Right? And we using the unequal probabilities for the entire range of the possible outcomes, right? And we solve the squared deviations, then take the average, weighted average is called our what? Variance, right? Then variance take a square root is our what? Standard deviations, right? So we will show how to use this formula, right, to solve the what? To solve the standard deviations, right? To solve the risk of your investment. So still the same numbers, right? We have in the last examples for the C stock and T stock, right? In the last video, we solved expected return for these two stocks, right? In these numbers. Now we will continue to solve what? We continue to solve the variance for the C and the variance for the T, right? That's the two measures for the stock risk, right? Prospectively, right? Let's do this one now. Because the C expected return, or you can say the average return, right, is 9.9%. Then what's the variance for the C? Will be what? Will be the individual return for a different state minus expected return on that state, right? Then we times the probability for a state of booming, right? So this is a booming state, and we use the probability of the booming times the difference between the return on booming state minus expected return, right? The difference take a square, then times probabilities, right? That's for the booming state, right? Product. Then for the normal state, right? We use probability for normal state, right? Times the normal state return, right? Minus what? Expected return. And for the stock C, right? We use the probability of the recession, right? This is for recession, right? Probability of recession times return on recession, right? Minus what? Expected return, right? The difference take a square, right? Times probability, right? So these terms, these three terms, will then adding up. The total will be what? Will be the variance, right? The variance take a square root will be what? Will be the standard deviations of the what? Of the stock C, right? So let me write the formula down again, right? Probability for the state, right, times the return on that state minus expected return, right? Be careful, this one will take a difference first, right? The difference squared, right, times probability on that state, right? The total will be what? Will be the variance, right? The variance, right? The variance take a square root will be what? Will be the sigma, right? Will be the standard deviations. So variance take a square root will be the sigma. Right? So that's our calculations, right? Be careful, this is only for one state, right? If we have the multiple state, we will then adding them up, right? Like we did for these three states, right? We use the summations, right? From the I to N, suppose we have N state, right? We will adding all these N state product up, right? Will be the variance. After you solve the variance, take a square root will be the standard deviations. Similarly, right, for the T stock, we can do the same thing, right? So we use the return for the T stock return, right, for a different state, right? First, we will minus the swap return, right? Now we will take our square, right? Now we will adding them up, right? Be careful before you adding them up. We know for a different state, probability is what? Is different, right? So that's why we need to first times what? Probability for a different state, right? Now we will adding them up. After we do the submissions, we will take our square root, that will be the standard deviations, right? We will show this one in more detail in the Excel sheet I will post in the videos, right? So in the Excel tutorials, I will show how to solve it, right, in more details, right? Will be probability, right, times the difference squared, right? Then do the summations, right, is the variance, right? So let me use a sentence to summarize this rule, right, this formula. Sum of what? Difference squared. Right, the difference squared here, right, should times what? Probability first, right? So sum of probability times difference squared, right, is equal to what? Variance, right? The variance take as square root will be what? Will be the sigma standard deviations, right? That's the formula for the risk, right? Okay, so the next one also a measure for risk, right? We call a coefficient of variation, right? So it's called a CV, right? CV is the abbreviation of the coefficient of variation, and the measure is used the sigma over return, right? So you can say if we have two stock, right? A stock has the return 10%, right? Risk is 5%, right? It's the return, right? It's the risk. B has a return, 20%, right? Risk is what? 20%, for example, right? So which stock you will choose, right? If you only look at the return, right, you will say, okay, B is better. However, B has a higher return, but also with a higher risk, right? It's not easy to determine which one's better directly, right? We should be better to use something called relative measures, right, to compare these two investments. Use the coefficient of what? Variation, right? So we use the CV, right? For the A stock, right, we use the sigma 5% risk, right, over return 10%, right? So that's equal to 0.5, right? For the B stock, right, coefficient of variation, right, equal to what? 20% over 20%, right, equal to 1, right? So you can say which one has a higher risk. You can say this measurement coefficient of variation measures a relative risk, right, between the two stocks, right? So A has a lower coefficient of variation. So A has a what? A has a less risk, right, than B. Right? B has a higher risk, right? With a 1%, right, return, A will take 0.5% risk, but B will take 1% risk. That's why the A has what? Less risk than B, right? So if you are offered two investments, right, they have not the same skill, right? One with a higher return, but with also a higher risk, right? How can you make a comparison? We use what? We use the coefficient of what? Of variation, right? The CV, right, to do a comparison, right? It's a relative risk measurement, right? The following examples, right? We just extending the state, right, to the fall state, right? So we have the booming, normal, slow down, the mild slowdown, then a big recession, right? So the calculations will be still similar to the last examples, but here we have the fall state, right? So expiry returns will be probability times return on that state, right? Probability of the booming times return from booming, right? This for the boom, right? This for the norm, this for the slowdown, and this for the recession, right? After you solve the product, you adding them up will be the expiry return, right? Same thing for the variance, right? Will be the probability of the return, right? Minus expiry return, right? Square. Right? Now after you solve the product, right, probability times the difference square, right, then you will do a summations. After you finish the summations of the probability times the difference square, right, you get a variance, right, then you take a square root, will be the sigma, right, will be standard deviations, right. After you solve the variance, you just take the square root, right? You solve the standard deviations, right? Standard deviations means for 1% return, right? What's the risk you will take, right? It's 5.17%, right? Also, when we study the, the normal distributions, right, in the statistical class, right, we see our expiry returns just what? Just the average, right? This is expiry return, right? And what's the risk? Risk is a sigma. That means variations around the expiry return, right? So what's your potential return? Can be deviate from the average. Can be either go to the what? Can be either go to the upside or go to what? Downside, right? So you can see this shows the variabilities, right? The higher of the sigma, right, means what? More variation of your what? Of your returns, right? Around the central, right? For example, if this is the A stock, right? If this is A stock, right? How about compare with the B stock? The B stock, for example, with a similar, expiry return, right? But has a higher what? Higher sigma, right? Higher sigma. So you can either take a higher gain than A, but also you will, potentially have a large, loss than A. So B with a higher what? Deviations, right? So B has a higher risk than A, right? Even they both has the same return, but B with a what? Higher risk, right? So if we want to compare A and B, right, we better use what? Coefficient of what? Variation, right? So with the same unit of return, which one will take more risk, right? Will be more risky, right, to take, right? Now let's study something about what? Portfolios, right? Portfolios is a collection of what? Assets, right? So in the portfolios, right, there are different, investment inside, right? For example, in this package of the portfolios, right, we have the stock, bond, mutual funds, right? CDs, 401k, right? 403b, right? 457b, right? Annuities, ETF, and IRA, right? So all these can be combined into one package called what? Called portfolios. So portfolios is a menu, right? This menu including different what? Different ingredients, right? Different dish, right? So this portfolios is a collection of what? Various, assets. Our asset, risk, and return are important in how they were affecting the risk and return of the portfolios, right? So if the portfolios is our whole class, right, then you guys will be just, the individual asset in these portfolios, right? So your guys' performance will also affecting our whole class performance as portfolios, right? So let's see the portfolios, right? When we study the portfolios, we want to consider about what? Risk and return, right? Most likely, if you want to have a higher return, you must take what? Higher risk, right? How can we make a compromise between these two? Make a trade-off, right? We don't want to take too much risk, but we don't want to sacrifice our return, right? How can we make a trade-off, right? That's our goal, right? To study what? Portfolios, right? We want to combine, different assets into a package, right? Into a, a menu, right? How can we minimize risk but maximize return at the same time? Right? That's our goal to study this part, right? For example, you are given $15,000, right, to investing in a 4 different stocks. Right? You spend different money to different stock here, right? 2,000 into the DCLK, 3,000 into a KO, 4,000 into a INTC, and 6,000 into a KEI, right? So you spend total money, $15,000, right, into these 4 different stock with different amount, right? The total will be $15,000, right? So based on this amount you allocate to different stock, right? We want to solve what? We want to solve first, what's the weight, right, for every, for each security, right, in your portfolios, right? What's the weight of the DCLK? Will be the total amount you spend or you allocate into DCLK, right, over total amount of the portfolios, right? DCLK you spend what? $2,000, right? The total amount of portfolios 15,000, right? So what's the weight? Will be the 2 over 15, right, equal to the 0.133, right? Same thing as the KI, right? What's the weight of the KI in a portfolios? Will be the 6,000 over 15,000, right? Equal to what? 2 over 5 equal to 2.4, right? So you spend 40% of your amount of the total investment, right, into the KI, these securities, right? So we can use this percentage of the weight to form our pie chart, right? In this pie chart, you can allocate, right, the area, right, into a different stock into a portfolios, right? For example, let me draw this pie chart. So this is a pie chart, right? And you can see we have the what? We have the 20%, right, into the DCLK, right? Sorry, 20% in the KO, right? KO. And 13.3%, right, into a DCLK. And 26.7%, right, is in a INTC, right? Remained will be in what? In the KI, right? So that's the proportion of your money spent into the different securities in these portfolios, right? And this, this proportion we call what? We call weight, right? The weight of the securities, right, in the portfolios, right? Weight of the securities in the portfolios. So what's the portfolio's expiry return, right? Portfolios is including different stock, right? So what's the total expiry return for these different stock, right? So for different stock, we can use our previous method, right? Use the probability for different state, right? Times return on that state, right? Do a summation to solve expiry return, right? But for the whole portfolios, right? We will use the individual stocks, expiry return, right, times the weight, right? Weight is the proportion of the money you allocate to the, investment J, right? So then you do the summations, right? That will be the total portfolio's return, right? Let's see the examples, right? For example, right, we get individual return, expiry return, right, in these following columns, right? 19.69% for the DCLK, right? That's for the expired return. Then we also have this return for the three stock, right? based on how much we allocate, right, in a what? In a pie chart, right, we have this what? We have this weight, right? We already solved, right? So let's put this weight together, right, into what? Into the return for this individual stock, right? Right, this is the weight, right? Right, this is the return, right, on the right hand side. And so now we can solve what? We can solve the portfolio's return, right, using the weight, right, times expected return for individual securities, right? Then do what? Do the summations, right? We have the 4 individual stock, right, in these portfolios, right? So let's do the calculations. Right, weight of the DCLK, right, is 13.3%, right, times return 19.69%, right? That's for the DCLK, right? We do the same thing, right, for the other stock, right? So for KO will be the 20%, right, times 5.25%, right? 26.7% times what? 16.65% for the INTC. For KI will be 40%, right? Times 18.24%, right? After we solve that, for each product, we will do what? We will do a summation, right? That will be the total portfolio returns, right, for these 4 stocks. Right, you can see the calculations here, right? Weight times return, weight times return, weight times return, weight times return, right? Then do the summations will be the overall portfolios, right, expected return. Now we will study what? Portfolio's variance, right? Portfolio's variance, we already solved the what? We already solved the, portfolio's return, right, here. Right, so this is our expected average return for the whole portfolios, right? Now we want to solve the risk, right? So what we will do, right? Let me show one example, right? Before we do the portfolio variance for these questions, right? For example, there are 2 stocks in the portfolios, right? And this stock A has returned 30% when the economy go to booming, right? And minus 10% if the stock, market go to the bust, right? And for B stock, comparatively, right, when the stock market go to booming, right, it will actually go to downside, right, minus 5%. However, if the market go to the bust, right, the B will get 25% return, right? So what's the expected return? We already solved this one before, right? It's the probability of the booming, right, times return from booming plus probability of the bust times return from bust, right? We solve the expected return for A stock, right? Same thing, we can solve the return for what? For B stock, right? For B stock, right, will be the 0.4, right, times minus 5, right, plus what? Plus the 0.6 times what? 25%, right? So that's the return for the B stock. At the same time, we can solve a risk, right? Use the variance, for example, right? Variance for A will be what? 0.4 times 30 minus 6, right? That's the expected returns, right? You already solved, right? 6% already solved, right? So 30 minus 6, that's the difference, right? Difference squared times probability, right? Difference squared times probability, right? Then do the summations will be the variance, right? Variance take a square root will be what? Will be the risk for the A asset, right? 19.6%. And we will continue to solve the B's return, 13%, right? We already show the formula below the A return, right? Now you get the numbers also, right? A's return is the 6%. B's return is what? 13%, right? B's risk is 14.7%. right? We can put these two numbers, right? These numbers in tables, right? To record, right? The A's risk, A's return, right? B's risk, B's return in total, right? So let me write down here, right? For A and B, we already solved the return and risk, right? So let me put them together, right? A's expected return, right? We already solved, right? Is what? Is 6%, right? Risk is what? Risk is 19.6%, right? 6%, 19.6%, right? For the B stock, right? Return is what? 13%, right? Risk is 14.7%, right? So first, we want to form what? Portfolios, right? These portfolios will split the money into the two stock, right? Even, right? So half money will put into A, the remaining half of money will put into the B. So A will take what? A will take 50%, right, in the portfolio, right? B will be 50% in what? In the portfolios, right? So let's solve the portfolios what? Return, right? We know the weight of the A, right, is 50%, right? Return we solved for the A, right, is what? 6%, right? For the B, weight is 50%, right? Return is what? Return is 13%, right? So our portfolio's return will be the weight of the A times the return of A plus weight of B times what? Return of B, right? So you can see, let's plug the number into, right? 50 times 6 plus 50 times what? 13, right? So total will be, 9.5%, right? 9.5% if you do the calculations, right? You can see here, right? We already got 9.5%, right? Solved, right? Just like we did, right? And also we can solve the portfolio's what? We can solve the portfolio's risk, right? How to solve a portfolio's risk, right? We solve the risk for each stock, right? Then we combine them together, right? And you can see we are not sure that these two stocks can show in the same, same trend or opposite trend, right? When they experience the different state of economy. Seems like, these two stocks moving in the opposite, right? For the different state of economy, right? So we cannot add in the risk directly up, because when we put these two stocks into the portfolios, right? You can see the A will moving like this way, for example. B will what? Moving in the opposite. So if they put together, right? Seems like they can hedge each other's, right? Their risk should be, reduced if they put into a portfolios, right? But if you just adding them, the risk directly up, right? The risk can be, not a correct measure, right? If you adding them to, directly, so we cannot add in the sigma of A, sigma of B directly to solve the, portfolio risk. Instead, right, we will do something different, right? So we will do the portfolios, right, directly, right? For the variance, then take a square root, right? The portfolio's return we already solved, right? It's 9.5%, right? 9.5%, as we just solved, right? Then what we will do, right? We will take what? Difference squared, right? What's the difference? Difference will for the A and B stock, right, on a different state, right? For example, right, what's the return when the economy is booming, right? A is 30%, B is minus 5%, right? So their what? Their portfolio return when the economies go to booming will 50 times the 30% plus 50 times minus 5%, right? So we have what? 15 right? Percent, right? Minus 2.5%, right? Equal to what? 12.5%, right? That's the portfolio return. One economy is booming, right? One economy go to the best, right? Returns what? 50% times minus 10 will be minus 500, right? Minus 5%, right? Then plus what? 25 times 50, right? 1250, right? Drop the 20, well, we have the 12.5%, right? So 12.5 minus 5 equal to what? 7.5%, right? So the number comes from, you see, the weight times return, right? Plus the weight times return, right? We got these numbers, right? So that's the return you solve for a different state of economies, right? For portfolios, right? Now we can move to solve the variance of the portfolios, right? Use the, return for a different state, right? Minus expired returns, right? We solved in the last questions, right? Minus 9.5, minus 9.5, right? Then take a square, right? Then the different square will times what? Probability for a different state, right? Then we will do the summations, will be what? Will be the variance, right? Will be the variance, right? So that's how the variance comes from, right? For these calculations, right? So if you cannot capture, right, what I'm talking here, right? So please check the lecture notes on Blackboard, right? So below each slide, you can see the margin shows the detail of the calculations, right? So you can capture these calculations, right, in below of the slide, right, to check the details. After you solve the variance of the portfolio, right, if you continue to take a square root, right, you got a standard deviations. So this is a measure of what? Measure of the risk for the whole portfolios, right? Let's check these numbers with our individual A and B's risk. Let's check this risk, right? Compare with each individual's risk, right? We already put the risk, right, in the table here, right? A's risk is 19.6%, right? B risk is 14.7%. But when we put them together, right, into the portfolios, right, what's the risk we solve? It's only 2.45%, right? So in the portfolios, right, in these pooled portfolios with the A and B together, right, because they are, stock price moving in the opposite for a different state of economy, right? So that's why you can see the risk, right, when we put them into the portfolios are what? Are reduced, right? You can see this is the A's return, right? This is B's return, right? When we adding them up, right? So you can see the risk will be what? Will be balance of, right? Will be getting smaller, right? So that's why we see the risk is much lower than A and B individual risk. We will see this one in more details, right? In the following examples. Okay, so I leave another examples for you to solve. That's just the similar examples we did, right, in these lectures, right? So please do this one by yourself. I put the answer below the lecture notes, right, in the margin, right? So when you download these lecture notes from Blackboard, please open it, right? Then you can check the answer below the slides, right, in the more details, right? So I will not put these details here, right? You can check this one at home. Okay, so let's say something, right? We already summarized, right? When we put the two stock A and B into the portfolios, right? The risk of the portfolios even less than individual stock, right? So why this one can happen and how, right? We need to, introduce a concept called what? Correlation, right? Correlation is what? Correlations means the, relations, right? Within what? Within the two individual what? Investment, right? To be more general, right? For the portfolio with many different individual assets, right? The correlations is the relation between each two series of the, the investment, right? So any two of the investment in your portfolios, they have some connections, right? These connections called what? correlations, right? So if the two series are positive correlated, that means they are moving in the same direction, right? For example, this one, right, means what? Means the same directions, right? When A moving up, right, B is also moving up, right? When when B moving down, right, A also moving down, right? So they moving in the same directions, right? They are what? Positively correlated. If the two series moving in the opposite directions, right? For example, like this one, and let me show this one here, right? When A moving up, right, B is moving down, right? When A moving down, B is moving up, right? They are moving in the opposite directions, right? We call this one as what? We have to call these two series as negatively correlated, right? So what happened to our portfolios? Right? If we put our two stocks, right, they are positive correlated, right? So when one move up, the other also moving up, right? So these two add into the portfolios, their risk will be not reduced too much, right? However, if the two stocks they are always moving in opposite, right? So when we put these two into portfolios, our risk of the portfolio will be reduced even further because what? For example, when economy is booming, right, our A stock is a good, performer, right? But when the economies go to the, downside, the B stock will show out good performing, right? So then if we put these two into the portfolios, right, they are hedging each other's, right, in different situations. That's why the negatively correlated, stocks, right, can be a good candidates, right, in the portfolio to reduce risk. The correlation coefficient is a measure of the degree, right, of a correlation between the two series, right? We want to quantify it, right, these correlations, right? We use a measure or indicator to tell us, right, how these two are correlated, right? We call this one as what? Correlation coefficient, right? If the correlation coefficient for the two series, right, are positive and equal to positive 1, for example, they are perfectly positively correlated, right? If they are negative 1, right, they are what? They are moving exactly on opposite trend, right? They are perfectly negatively correlated, right? So let me show you this one on a graph here, right? For example, right? Let me show you this correlation coefficient right here, right? For example, this is A and B on a on a chart. For example, right? If correlation equal to 1, right? This is A, this is B, right? We try to do a scatter plot, right, for these two stock, right? So here's the A's price, right? This is the B's price, right? The axis, horizontal axis is the A's, return, right? A's return, right? The vertical axis is the B's return, right? So while A's return going up, B's return is also going up, right? For every dot, right? So they are what? They are perfectly positively correlated, right? So correlation coefficient, right, equal to what? Equal to 1, right? So they are exactly on the same trend, right, with the dot to dot mapping, right? However, sometimes, right, they are not exactly, show this trend perfectly, right? For example, right, most dot is still, with the same trend, right? When the A's return increasing, B is also increasing. But there are some, special dot maybe increasing with less altitude, right? So you can see their scatter plot will be around this perfect line, right? They are just, dot, right, around this length, right? For example, like this one, right? So this one means they are not perfectly correlated, right? So the rho will be still positive, but less than 1, right? Less than 1, right? Very similar, right? How about the native correlated? Right? We will show the similar, right, to this chart, right? If they are perfectly natively correlated, right, the line should be in this format, right? This is perfectly, natively correlated, right? Rho is equal to -1 while A decrease, right? While return of A stock decrease, B's return is also is moving up, right? So they moving in the opposite directions, right? So the correlation is equal to the -1. They are perfectly natively correlated, right? But this is for very, perfect case, right? Sometimes if they still show this trend, right? But it's not like, perfect, right? For example, right? Like this way, right? Like this way, right? So they are still, perfect correlated, right? From the whole pattern, we can tell, right? When A's return decreasing, B's return will moving up, right? But it's not perfect, and so rho will be still what? Rho will be still less than 0, right? But more than what? -1, right? So they are not perfect, but still native correlated, right? So that's the correlation tells us about, right? Based on numbers, right? You measured. So here you can see the chart, right? Also show you, what is the positive correlated, right? What's the negative correlated, right? They are not required to be the linear, right? For example, it can be curve, right? So you can see for the N and M series, right? When N shows the up, right? M also shows up, right? So they shows the same pattern, right? With no, exceptions, right? So they are perfectly positively correlated, right? For the N and M on right hand side, right? This chart, right? Every time when N move down, right? M will moving up, right? Every time when N move up, right? M will moving down. So they are what? They are perfectly native correlated, right? So if we adding, N and M into the stock portfolios, right? You can see their, their whole, variations, right, will be reduced, right? Because they are hedging each others, right? For example, like this one, right? But for this one, they are not, hedging each others, right? So their risk will be still, high, right? Still high, right? But it's not same high as individuals, right? To reduce overall risk, it is best to diversify by what? By combining different individual assets into the portfolios, right? So the assets with the lowest possible correlations, right, will has the lowest risk for your portfolios, right? We try to combine assets with the low correlations, right, into the portfolio to reduce the overall variations of the portfolio's return, right? However, if the two stock has no correlations, right, or you can say uncorrelated, right, then it's not beneficial if you put them into the portfolios, right? If the two, series are independent, right, then if you put them into the portfolios, cannot reduce the risk. For example, you can see for F and G, they are what? Moving in opposite, right? So they are natively correlated, right? They are natively correlated, right? You can compare the dot, right, with the F and G, right? They are moving opposite, right? So if we put them together into portfolios, right, you can see return of the portfolios, right, with the less variations, right? So rates are what? Rates are reduced, right? You can, put a dot together, right? Then you can see they will form this orange curve, right? So with the less variation like individuals.